Il-ġurnalisti li naqattu magħna hawnhekk dalgħodu nsellmu wkoll lil kull min qed isegwina mid-dar tiegħu. Qegħdin hawn dalgħodu sabiex nillonċjaw l-attivitajiet fl-okkażjoni tal-5 anniversarju tal-assassinju ta' Defni Caruana Galizia. It-tema li għażilna għal dan l-anniversarju importanti hu Defni eroj Maltija. Għażilna din it-tema għal żewġ raġunijiet. L-ewwel nett l-inkjesta pubblika dwar l-assassinju ta' Defni Caruana Galizia użat propju din il-kelma biex tiddeskrivi lil Defni eroj. U xi tfisser li tkun eroj u għalfejn Defni eroj? Defni eroj għaliex kienet taf illi biex tagħmel xogħla sew ta' ġurnalista investigattiva kellha taffaċċja periklu kbir ħafna saħansitra fuq ħajjitha u għażlet illi xorta waħda taqdi dik il-funzjoni tant vitali f'demokrazija, jiġifieri li jkollna libertà tal-istampa ħilsa u ġurnalisti illi ifittxu l-verità akkosta kollox. U propju Defni u dak illi għamlet u għal dan ħalset l-ogħla prezz possibbli, jiġifieri ħajjitha. Irridu bil-fors ninnotaw illi il-gvern u elementi importanti fl-Istat Malti għadhom iħarsu lejn Defni Caruana Galizia b'ostilità. In-narrattiva li għadha qed tingħata mill-Gvern Malti u mill-partit fil-Gvern permezz tal-medja u l-esponenti tiegħu hija waħda ta' akkaniment saħansitra jinnegaw illi Defni Caruana Galizia kienet ġurnalista. Dan jikkontrasta ħafna ma' l-isforzi li qed isiru fil-Parlament Ewropew anke biex fil-jiem li ġejjin ikun hemm diskussjoni propju dwar l-istat ta' impunità f'Malta, partikolarment dak li riżulta mill-assassinju nifissu ta' Defni Caruana Galizia. Irridu ninnotaw ukoll li l-Gvern Malti bl-ebda mod metjati ġieħ lil Defni Caruana Galizia lanqas f'dan l-anniversarju tant importanti, sissa assolutament ma nafu bl-ebda inizjattiva da parti tal-Gvern Malti biex jirrikonoxxi ir-rwol importanti illi Defni kellha fis-soċjetà tagħna bil-qalġiet komuni tagħna il-koll u saħansitra hija manifest tal-intenzjoni tal-Gvern Malti illi jipprova jnessi lil Defni Caruana Galizia mill-memorja kollettiva tagħna u saħansitra qar minn hekk jipprova jwassal il-messaġġ illi il-fatt li l-ġurnalista Maltija inqatlet f'Malta mhix xi ħaġa daqstant importanti. Irridu wkoll nissottolinjaw il-fatt li rakkomandazzjonijiet tal-inkjesta pubblika ta' dawk it-tliet imħalfin li mexxew l-inkjesta pubblika dwar l-assassinju ta' Defni Caruana Galizia ġew injorati prattikament kollha. Rajna illi dawn irrakkomandaw fuq suġġeriment tagħna illi f'Malta tiġi introdotta leġiżlazzjoni kontra il-fenomenu tal-mafja, il-Gvern Malti assolutament ma jridx jisma' fuq dan il-punt u saħansitra meta l-oppożizzjoni xurilu resqet mozzjoni propju dwar dan is-suġġett, il-Gvern Malti rrifjuta li jivvota favorija. F'dawn il-jiem rajna il-proposti tal-Gvern Malti dwar ir-riforma dak li għandu x'aqsam mal-ġurnaliżmu, rajna li din saret bl-ebda konsultazzjoni effettiva mal-familja ta' Defni Caruana Galizia, kif ukoll lanqas kien hemm konsultazzjoni sura ta' nies mal-ġurnalisti innifishom u saħansitra fuq dawk il-ġurnalisti illi ħadu b'xi mod sehem f'dan il-proċess dawna kellhom jintrabtu il-Gvern rabathom illi ma jikkonsultawx ma' sħabhom. F'dawn is-snin, f'dawn il-5 snin, rajna illi Defni Caruana Galizia darba wara l-oħra ingħatat raġun fuq l-istejjer tagħha u propju f'din il-wirja illi qegħdin nibdew illum qed nuru stejjer li fuqhom Defni ingħatat raġun matul dawn il-5 snin. Irridu niġbdu l-attenzjoni illi f'dawn il-5 snin is-soċjetà ċivili u l-familja ta' Defni Caruana Galizia flimkien għamilna sforz eċċezzjonali u bla preċedent biex inżommu ħajja kemm il-memorja ta' Defni Caruana Galizia kif ukoll il-kawża u l-istejjer illi Defni kixfet. Il-fatt illi kull xahar iltqajna fil-Belt Valletta għal manifestazzjoni pubblika tal-massa hi xi ħaġa bla preċedent jiena nazzarda ngħid mhux biss pajjiżna iżda ukoll fil-kumplament tad-dinja. Fejn irridu naslu aħna? Aħna rridu naslu biex l-ewwel nett ikun hawn ġustizzja fuq il-korruzzjoni u fuq l-abbuż mod ġenerali illi jeżisti f'pajjiżna u dan għadna il-bot milli narawh f'pajjiżna għaliex istituzzjonijiet bħal korp tal-Pulizija għadhom istituzzjonijiet ta' impunità f'dan il-pajjiż u it-tinet iridu naraw illi l-istituzzjonijiet tagħna jibdew jitmexxew b'integrità. Din għadha mhijiex ir-realtà. Għadna naraw li l-istituzzjonijiet ewlenin tal-Istat Malti għadhom għodda ta' impunità anka sal-lum il-ġurnata. Nagħlaq b'żewġ affarijiet l-ewwel nett nagħmel appell lin-nies biex jikkonkorru għall-avvenimenti għall-attivitajiet li aħna qegħdin norganizzaw, Klamans warajja ħassemmi wkoll se jkunu dawn l-attivitajiet. Irrid ngħid li għal dan l-anniversarju se jkollna żewġ mistiednin distinti li huma il-President tal-Parlament Ewropew Roberta Metsola, kif ukoll oħt il-Maġistrat assassinat mill-mafja 30 sena ilu Giovanni Falcone u allura oħtu Maria Falcone se tkun magħna. Ser ikonna wkoll persuna distinta oħra illi ħatkun qiegħda tingħaqad magħna li hija l-ġurnalista mill-Ingilterra Carol Cadwalader u Clemens ħatkun qiegħda tispjega propju se jkunu dawn l-attivitajiet. L-aħħar nett appell biex in-nies jgħinuna finanzjarjament għal dawn l-attivitajiet. Dawn l-attivitajiet se jkunu qed jiswewna is-somma ta' 20,000 euro anke li xridna illi f'dan l-anniversarju daqstant importanti nagħmlu attivitajiet propri li riflettu l-importanza ta' dan l-anniversarju. U allura bħalissa qed nillonċjaw fundraiser fl-indirizz fundraiser.com/Defni Eroj Maltija u propju min isegwina mid-dar tiegħu se jkun bħalissa qed jara fuq l-iskrin tiegħu l-indirizz ta' dan il-fundraiser. Nappella lin-nies sabiex jgħinuna sabiex jattendu l-attivitajiet li qed norganizzaw.
For the past 5 years, the women of Occupy Justice, have campaigned hard calling for justice for Daphne Caruana Galizia and her family. Here we are on the eve of the 5th anniversary of her killing, and justice remains elusive. We may be close to a trial of 2 of her killers, and another one is serving a reduced sentence to help the police. But even in comparison to what we know, this is nowhere near where justice should be by now. Even worse is the failure of the state to act on the crimes Daphne's murder was commissioned to cover up. The Maltese state is unwilling or unable to prosecute criminals with political influence. There is a mixture of complicity and ineptitude, and repeatedly in court, crooks like Keith Cambry and Jürgen Fenech are invited to laugh at us and even give us reason to make themselves out to be the victims. The Maltese state is unwilling or unable to render justice to Daphne the journalist. We will try to do some of that with this exhibition and the documentary we co-produced with Republica, which is premiering on Wednesday 12th, where we're looking at the investigation Daphne was working on, right until the moment she was killed. Those stories continued to develop since she died, mostly through the work of other journalists who picked up her torch. Those stories confirm Daphne was right. The Maltese state doesn't want to acknowledge it. It would hurt them to admit that Daphne was right when our political leaders, subordinates of Joseph Muscat, had been so wrong. In our small way, we aim to give Daphne a small portion of the justice she deserves by recalling her work and underlining just how right she was. The Maltese state is unwilling to render justice to Daphne, the journalist. More than a year ago, the public inquiry documented how the Maltese state failed to protect her life and actively created the atmosphere that allowed her killers to reach her. The same political leaders found responsible for running a state that killed a journalist now wants to write laws ostensibly to protect journalists. They expect us to trust them, to empower journalists to uncover their dalliance and their crimes. They expect us to believe that they will unilaterally submit themselves to journalistic scrutiny now, when just 5 years ago they killed or allowed others to kill Daphne for them. The Maltese state is unwilling to render justice to Daphne, the person. They still avoid using her names as they avoided it when she was alive. They still pretend she never existed and she was never deserving of the attention her powerful work demanded. In the absence of a proper official recognition of this victim of state failure, we'll remember Daphne, the mother, daughter, wife, sister, aunt and friend. Archbishop Shikluna will say Mass on Sunday 16th in the morning at the Biniya Chapel. In the afternoon at 3 p.m. in the hour and the place where Daphne last drew breath, with the women of Occupy Justice, we'll pay silent tribute to Daphne. We will relieve the silent horror of her taking, but we will continue to stand in hope that her example and her ultimate sacrifice moves heart and minds. To us, women, Daphne was a particularly shining example. Her voice never trembled in a man's world where men expect women to shut up. She did not mind criticizing women in public life who fell short of their responsibilities, and sometimes this was misconstrued as desolated to women in general. She's been accused falsely of many things and did what was and this was one of the falsehoods, another injustice she was made to suffer. Truth was her highest value and she spoke it without fear and favor. But she was warm, kind and generous, and her concern for women suffering at the hands of men was exemplified by more than her journalism. Her quiet support of Darmer Babek shows just that. It is not insignificant that some exemplary women will be joining us at the event making this 5th anniversary, particularly the evening of the 16th at our march that starts from behind me at 18:30 and culminates with a vigil in front of the court building. Maria Falcone is more than the sister of a famous judge killed by the mafia. She's an eminent jurist who has testified in her country and around the world for 30 years of unceasing campaigning, mobilizing students and teachers to fight the mafia. Carol Cadwalladr is a brave journalist who stood up to the abuse of our democracies by radicals, extremists and corrupt interests who were given the space to steal ballots in Western democracies by giants like Facebook and Google. She was faced by crippling slap suit intended to intimidate her to shut up. But for the fact that she's alive, her story resembles Daphne in many ways, a sister both professionally and emotionally. Carol will also be answering questions in a session that should interest anyone who is worried on how democracies around us, including our own, are eroding through manipulation and the abuse of technology. That session is happening at the old university building on Saturday, 15th in the evening. Also joining us on Sunday at our vigil will be the European Parliament President Roberta Metsola. 5 years ago, under shock at the news of the killing of Daphne, we watched and waited as our political leaders debated whether the murder of a journalist merited a shift in the agenda of Parliament for a special discussion. At the time, they decided the matter wasn't important enough. That's when Occupy Justice came to be. We realized we could not wait for our politicians to fix the mess they had caused. If we waited for them to clean the mess, they'd seek to hide it instead. 5 years later, we find that the European Parliament will be discussing how Malta has still not given justice to Daphne and has still not done anything to reverse the toxic atmosphere that killed her. Some Maltese politicians pretend to be shocked by this decision of the European Parliament. For them, there are no challenges to discuss. That denial in itself is a threat. We are now worse off than we were on Daphne's killing, because now we have a government that openly lies by saying that they have solved problems they have never accepted they existed. As it was 5 years ago, it falls to us to call on all women and girls who, like Daphne, want a better Malta, a democratic Malta, where human rights are expected and speech is free, to raise their voices. Please join us at this event over the coming days. This is our nation, this is our home, and we are the people. We expect that better, we deserve better, we demand better. Thank you.
Grazie ħafna. Taw xi mistoqsijiet naturalment.